communicating any confidential information you would not like shared. The meeting is now being recorded. Cameron, I'm going to turn everything over to you. Thank you, everyone, for joining today.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So again, hi everyone. My name is Cameron Nix and I am the Wellness Programs Coordinator. And so throughout this presentation, it is Mindful Monday. So the first thing that we want to talk about is how we can use mindfulness as a tool for balancing work and personal life when things can become overwhelming. So this presentation really is designed to help you find a moment or two every day to practice mindfulness and get some relief from some of those everyday stressors. Especially as we're reaching that end of this stressful semester, it's important to continue to remind ourselves of these daily practices so we can feel less overwhelmed and also help find ourselves overcome some of those other stressful scenarios that might come about. Next slide. Yep. So some of the objectives that we'll cover today include understanding what mindfulness means, right? So sometimes we have an idea of what mindfulness is, but we can really put ourselves to the test with redefining that definition. We'll identify times to practice mindfulness, but then our key takeaway is gaining some of those strategies necessary to help balance our professional lives, work, and really cope with those unforeseen circumstances, right? So just a little heads up, this presentation will be roughly 50 minutes and it'll be very interactive. So I'll kind of guide you through two major activities, allow you for open, fluid discussion about your thoughts and feelings. And so some of those strategies that we'll gain through those two activities are really designed to help you better understand what mindfulness is and how to practice it with some of those skills. So I'll start us off with one of these first activities, and I'll start us off with an icebreaker following some of our ground rules. So our ground rules, again, what we need to do is we need to have an understanding of one another, right? So some of us will be talking about some personal things, determining what your activity you choose to disclose, and we don't want to be judgmental of each other. So just be mindful of that as we are in a Zoom space. So we'll open it up with an icebreaker. If you could, let's set a one-word check-in. How are you feeling today? How are you doing this week? How are you feeling in this moment? And just feel free to type it in the chat, say it out loud, do what you feel. Fine. Great. Yes, make sure to reply all. Pumped, energized, curious. Yes, definitely. So that's good, right? So we want to do that as an icebreaker, not only in this moment, but also throughout the day. And also just to remind ourselves to do that periodically in life, right? Especially when we give ourselves that daily check-in, it allows us to see where our mind is going and allows us to redirect some of those thoughts, right? So we can focus some of the mindfulness strategies that we use today and push them into the future. Overstimulated, definitely, right? There's a lot of things going on at once. I know, especially with the end of the semester, depending on if you're faculty or staff, right? Your tasks may vary, but definitely as we're coming on the other side of that semester, it's important to check in with ourselves. Next slide. So what we'll first do is I'd like you to take out a piece of paper. So if you could just take out either a sheet of paper or just have some type of notes app open. Again, like I said, this will be a very interactive presentation. So something that I'd like for you to do is just have that out and write down some intentions that you have for yourself for this presentation based on the objectives we went through and just your expectations for what you want to discuss. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. And as you do that, I encourage yourself to, as we're going throughout the rest of this presentation, to use those intentions to look back at if you find yourself, your mind kind of wandering, if you find your thoughts kind of focusing on other things, maybe you're not doing this in a quiet space. So definitely having that as a focal point for this presentation is going to help us be glued back in. I've also got all of our chats saved in this presentation. So it'll help me if we, at the end of this presentation, want to go through anything else to make sure some of those areas are addressed at the end. So I'll give you another 15 or so seconds to write down those intentions. And as you will, if you would share them on either the chat. If you want to talk about them, we can sort of set those intentions now. So I'll give you about 15 more seconds to kind of like think about what your intention for this session is today. Better understand mindfulness, right? So we talked about how we're going to redefine what that definition of mindfulness might look like for you, right? So that's definitely something you want to do. Learn new techniques. I think that's why I really like this presentation. So this presentation is actually designed from a workshop. And so it's designed to be very interactive. So keep that in mind as you're taking notes. I'll kind of go through a list of things to keep note of as we're talking about this. Definitely quick. I like that you talked about gaining quick strategies. So emphasis on quick, right? So anytime we do sort of these practices, we understand that we have a very busy schedule. So all of these activities are designed to either be built naturally into your schedule, so you don't really have to build in time for those, but also very quick activities. We've got activities from 20, 10 down to 5 minutes, and apps that can also help with some of those things. So definitely. So now we can talk about, what does mindfulness mean to you? So feel free. I feel like a few people have already put something into the chat, but what does mindfulness mean to you? You can raise your hand, you can shout it out. What does it mean, right? And then we'll kind of compare and contrast that with our definition. Focusing on the here and the now, right? I like that somebody said that. Being present in the moment, being present. Yeah, so if we could talk about what mindfulness means, right? Our definition of mindfulness, according to mindfulness.com, is basically being fully present in the moment and being aware of where we are and what we're doing. So as a little note, as we kind of go throughout this presentation, you all will get access to the slides. So don't worry about any resources that I talk about that don't necessarily link. Anytime you see something underlined, that is a hyperlink. So you'll get access when you see the PDF version of the presentation. Those are clickable links. So don't worry about this. But according to mindful.org, mindfulness is being fully present of and aware of where we are and what we're doing. Right. So when we talk about mindfulness, it's a really useful tool to improve your ability to regain control and understanding of either negative feelings, capture positive memories, and detect and relieve stress. It's really good for checking in on yourself moment to moment, or just simply taking time to reset. And what I like to emphasize when we talk about mindfulness, it's all about being intentional. So some other things about what mindfulness is mindfulness is both an art and a practice, but again, it's a way to check in with yourself moment to moment. I like to emphasize that when you feel good, everyone else around you is able to feel good because your energy exudes and influences them. Mindfulness is also really good for helping you be the most productive version of yourselves. Because what we're doing essentially is, when we're being intentional with directing our thoughts, it can actually help us to target what our stressors are versus our motivational factors. So that's really good when we talk about that intentional active thought. What is bringing up some of those stressors throughout the day, and how can we overcome them to be something that's actually motivating us and benefiting us in the future? Something that mindfulness is not always meant to be something you're doing when it's either calm or collected, right? So when we talk about being present and we talk about thinking about how we're feeling, sometimes that misconception is that mindfulness is about redirecting those thoughts to always be positive. Sometimes it's actually about emphasizing just how we're feeling in that moment. If that is meaning that we are feeling sort of those stereotypical negative thoughts, feel those thoughts, work through those thoughts. And maybe instead of thinking about ways that they can be more positive, just think about ways that they can push you to be better, right? Something that I like to emphasize is that mindfulness does not simply have to be silent meditation either. Mindfulness is intentional and includes intentional thinking. This is an active practice, and sometimes it can be difficult to think about things that we might typically neglect or oversee in terms of things like our five senses or lingering thoughts and feelings. But when I talk about mindfulness being intentional, we are using that as an active time to think about our thoughts, our feelings, and our bodily sensations. So it's not the lack thereof. We're doing a lot when we are being mindful. And so mindfulness can look like a lot of different things. As I go throughout this presentation, something else to look through is I like to bolden, red, and italicize things that I personally identify with. So these are really what I'm going to be touching base on when I go throughout the presentation. As you see things that are boldened, italicized, and red, those are things that I like to address and I personally identify with. So mindfulness can look like a lot of different things. But one of the things that we'll actually do in this presentation is we'll go through a breathing exercise. So we'll go through the difference between nostril breathing and abdominal breathing. And then what I also like to emphasize is mindful eating. Can anybody in the chat tell me what they think mindful eating is? Does anybody know what mindful eating might be?
So the way I understand it is that you eat what you want, how much you want, when you're hungry, and you try to tune into your body to figure out why you're eating instead of just eating because you're emotional or you're stressed. You pay more attention to your body in the moment to
Yes.
eat. And it's less constricted.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that definition, how you said less constricted, really being thoughtful in what you're eating and intentional. I think sometimes people might get a misconception as well when we talk about mindful eating, with the difference between that and intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is something that we do push. Intuitive eating is not necessarily eating 3 meals a day at a specific structured time, but eating when we feel like we're hungry, eating when our bodies are ready to eat, and being intentional with what we're putting into our bodies. But when we talk about mindful eating, we're really paying attention to those 5 senses. How do the things that we put into our body make us feel when we eat them? Do they actually benefit us? Do they make us feel better? And then how can we focus on each of those 5 senses when we're eating it? When we're eating that pasta, right? How does it taste? But also, what is the texture of it? How does it smell? And how are we being mindful when we eat that food? So it's not something that you can do. It definitely helps you if something that you look for is taking more controlled bites, being more intentional with your eating. But sometimes when we think about eating can turn into a chore, right? Based on what we're eating, how long we've got on a lunch break, things like that. But when we take that time to truly be mindful and intentional into what foods we're putting in our bodies, that right there in itself is being intentional and taking active times in our day to be mindful. So I really like to point that out. Is there anything anybody else kind of does that's not listed or is listed that they like to shout out? Yes, mindfulness walks. Those are really good. I know that one thing that we like to push, especially when we did our most recent Wolf Walks challenge, was kind of encouraging tips to take your meetings on the go, especially when we have less rigid summer schedules. I think that's a really good thing. If you have time throughout the day, take a meeting on the go and build in that time for walking. I also think, right, I tell this to students all the time, but the same goes with faculty staff. If you have a moment where you have to get from point A to point B on campus or wherever your meeting might be, use that time to be mindful. Think about the stressors that might have, been lingering from the week prior, and just let those kind of drift away during that time period. I think it's a great time to just relax during that time and get yourself prepared for that next step. Yeah, some people prefer headphones, but again, that goes back to that understanding of mindfulness is different for everybody, right? It's very personal and what you do with it and how you choose to practice it. For some people, right, headphones is really relaxing. For me, when I start to use headphones as a tool for mindfulness, especially when I'm trying to be intentional about what I'm thinking of or how my body is reacting to certain emotions, that can be sort of a distraction. That's also something that I talk about with like study habits and things like that too, because if you know the lyrics to a song, sometimes we over focus on that, right? And we don't think about anything but the lyrics, or we don't think about anything but the pattern in which the music is going. So if you do like to listen to music when you go on those walks, I recommend trying new things, right? Listen to a song that you've never heard before. That way you're not overly thinking about the song and you're actually able to have thoughts outside of that music. But now we can go on with our first activity. So our first activity is really about observation. So with this activity, this is going to be very interactive, and I'll encourage you to go ahead and take out that piece of paper or your notes as we kind of get into it. But I'll kind of go through step by step what each of those moments in the activity are going to look like. So step one within our observation activity is we're going to really work on things like determining what is stressing us out versus thinking about things that we're looking forward to throughout the week. If you'll go on to the next slide. Yep, so that first one is really think about one thing that stressed you out this week, and then one thing that you look forward to. So if you'll just take a few seconds to write that down on a sheet of paper. And as we sort of do that, we'll then break you up into groups, and we'll break you up into groups about 5 or 6. So this is where I'll take you out into breakout rooms. Then what I'll do is I will direct your attention to thinking about how you're feeling in that moment. So if next one, step 3. Notice how it feels to speak, how it feels to talk when something is coming up that's stressful, and then how it feels to share something positive, right? When we're talking about being mindful and intentional with our thinking, it's important to understand and realize how some of those long-lasting thoughts impact the way that we feel going into the future. Because a lot of those do have a lasting impact on us. Sort of things that happen in the past can kind of weigh on our minds, but it's also important to think about that and compare and contrast between our positive thoughts. And so after you do that, really also think about when your group is sharing, think about how each of your group members are communicating those things, right? So how is your group member communicating when they're talking about those things that are positive versus negative? And then think about what your thoughts are as you're listening through that activity as well. So what I'll do here is I will break you up into your breakout rooms. I'll put you in the room for about 5 minutes. I'll kind of communicate with y'all as you do so, but I'll also be in the main room here waiting if anybody doesn't feel comfortable or doesn't want to break out. So what I will do is I will automatically open all those rooms, and you should automatically be able to pop into one. Let's see. See some people leaving perfectly. I will just go ahead and.
Are we supposed to receive a prompt to join a room?
Yep, I'm adding y'all right now.
Thank you.
Yep. So slowly but surely, we're getting everybody in there. I'll make sure that we all kind of get in there. And we'll just take 5 minutes as we do this. If you're still waiting to be assigned, I think this is a great opportunity to go ahead and start to think about something positive and negative. Right. Perfect. Just a few more here. Okay. So how many people have not been assigned? Let's see how many people have not been assigned here. So it looks like we've got the perfect amount of people still in here. And so we'll kind of do a breakout room of our own here in this main section. So does anybody kind of want to discuss anything that they've already written about something that they're stressed with right now versus something that they're looking forward to? And I can definitely pop it in the chat as well. Does anybody have like kind of a point of discussion that they want to talk about, something that stresses them out versus something that they're looking forward to?
I was just gonna say, Cameron, I sent a reminder to the group that they have until 3:28 in their breakout groups. I sent a broadcast.
No problem, Tiffany. If you want to, we're kind of using this space as an opportunity for breakout rooms as well. So feel welcome. I think you also have the ability to join a breakout room. If you want to, there should be an option for a breakout room on the side. So feel welcome. Jonah, Christine, Stacy, were y'all able to? Were y'all able to pop in a breakout room, or are you just now joining? Okay. No problem. Let's see
Just
here.
joining. I'm fine not going into a breakout room.
Yeah, no problem. So with this first activity, the whole activity is supposed to be, the whole activity was supposed to be about kind of writing something that stressed you out versus something that you're looking forward to. And so the activity, depending on how many people were in your breakout room, it was supposed to be an opportunity to kind of talk about how you're feeling and then have that one-on-one discussion. have that one-on-one discussion with folks about how you're feeling, whether that's your bodily sensations, having time for listening, and things like that. But it seems like a few people kind of left the breakout room / they were assigned, but kind of dropped out. So we're using this place as an opportunity to talk about those things if you wanted to as well. But regardless, yeah. Okay, it seems like some people are hopping back on. Looks like some of the breakout rooms are starting to close. So if you're welcoming back in, that's great. So was anybody able to have a discussion with their folks, or kind of did it cut short a little bit? Yeah, so Tiffany, I know we had talked about your other group member couldn't join. Was anybody able to kind of have some type of discussion with this topic or able to do this activity? James, yes, good. Greg, awesome. I know. So the group chat's auto timed at 5 minutes. So unfortunately, it kind of cut out a little bit early. But for those of you who are able to do a little one-on-one, I'm glad that you were able to do that. Definitely. That's okay if you lost some people. I think just the smaller the group, the better with these kind of one-on-one scenarios. Does anybody feel comfortable sharing kind of what they discussed in terms of stressors versus something they looked forward to? Leslie, good. I think, right, these are a lot of different things that you have to think about concurrently when you do an activity like this. But does anybody have any takeaways, something that they were able to grab from their group? Definitely, Krista. You can unmute.
One of the things that I tried to pay attention to was that when talking about something that we were looking forward to, I noticed that my partner smiled when she talked about that. So you could almost see the tension, a tension release when she talked about what she was looking forward to. And I tried to notice in myself the same thing. And when I talked about the activity that I'm looking forward to this week, if you hear anything, that's just my doggies trying to get in. I apologize if you hear something in the background. I noticed that I felt more relaxed when I talked about what I was looking forward to versus what was stressing me out. So the changes in our body language, I noticed.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's important, right? When I go back to that topic of sort of these past experiences do have lasting impact on us. Those sort of experiences do linger, whether they are negative or positive, so to speak. But when we talk about those positive, right, those have an impact on our body as well. And so part of that mindfulness discussion is paying attention to those bodily sensations, whether it's a positive conversation or negative. I think it's good, Kelly, that y'all kind of talked about some financial stressors too, right? So at Wellness and Recreation, but also campus wide, we talk about those 6 elements of wellness, and financial well-being is a huge thing that we talk about when we discuss what affects us, what affects our mental well-being and things like that. And financial constraint is huge, especially right now. But we've got a lot of good things moving forward too. So I think it's important to not only look at things that might linger on us like in a negative light, but also things that we can look forward to as well to kind of push ourselves forward. Is there anybody else who kind of wants to share anything? I know we weren't able to discuss for too long, but hopefully get some good reflection out of our days, be intentional as we can.
I can share.
Yeah.
So one of the things the thing that was stressing me out is the summer coming and whether I'll have enough work to do. I had quite a volume of work in the of course, in the fall and spring, and I'm sure that's probably a lot with most of the departments. But I like being kept busy, and it was suggested that I, maybe look at it as it's, having a little break and maybe learning new activities or doing different things, having that opportunity and the time to do different things.
Yeah, I think same with us at Wellness and Recreation. We have a huge flow of students kind of leaving over the summer with exams finishing up and everything. But I think it's good to look at mindfulness when we talk about even this time of, we're seeing the other side of that stress, to still remind ourselves to build in time for checking in on our mental health, checking in on our mental breaks and things like that. Especially because mindfulness is part of our self-care routine, right? And part of that self-care is just making sure that we have our daily routine maintenance. So when things do come awry, when we know that we are about to enter a time of high stress, or if we're even unprepared for those stressful moments, we have done some type of internal reflection on what might be the source of that stress or how to get to the other side of that. So thank you so much again, Leslie, for sharing. I think that's a really important insight.
You're welcome.
So next we can kind of talk about meditation, right? So we'll kind of discuss, what does meditation look like to you? So does anybody kind of have an understanding of what meditation looks like to them? If they were to just describe meditation randomly, how they would describe it? And we'll kind of combine that definition with mindfulness meditation as we discuss it.
This isn't in my own words, but when I do like guided meditations on like the Calm app or Headspace, they'll talk about just noticing your thoughts and just look sort of like a car passing by, or like a balloon floating away, or like a cloud in the sky. So just, I guess, being in the present, whether that's by focusing on your breathing, focusing on the sounds around you, and just letting your thoughts come and go.
Yeah, so I kind of like how you talked about what you were alluding to, right? Is like meditation can look a little bit different depending on what you're focusing on. So meditation can have many different focuses. And I like that you said that. Donna said controlled breathing, relaxing your entire body, taking time to center yourself and focus on you. So that's where we can kind of do the comparing and contrasting between what meditation might look like versus mindfulness. So I'll pull up a Venn diagram here. Next slide. And what this mindfulness meditation will really look like is kind of discussing how meditation really focuses on concentration, versus mindfulness. We can kind of think about that as our awareness, right? So meditation can be thought as that concentration, while mindfulness is our awareness. So when we practice something like mindfulness meditation, we're concentrating of our awareness of our bodies and what's going on around us. As I kind of mentioned before, not only can mindfulness and meditation look different from person to person, but it's also mindfulness. Not all mindfulness is meditation, right? So there are many different avenues to go about. Mindfulness meditation is just one great practice that we utilize to practice mindfulness. When we talk about meditation as well, we can kind of think about meditation as something that we use as like prescribed time dedicated to practice mindfulness. So when you think about mindfulness meditation, I really encourage you to diversify the topics that you kind of focus on. When we talk about focusing on the positive, when you think about gratitude, right? That's not the only thing that you need to dedicate towards, nor do you even have to focus on that at all. I encourage you to kind of diversify that mind into thinking about either kindness, you can think about hope, grief, and forgiveness. Those are just a few examples, but we really don't always have to think about the positive when we think about things like this. Sometimes that can be more draining to try to redirect our thoughts in that direction. So it's really good to think about meditation as a prescribed time to practice mindfulness. So in addition, we have a guide to mindfulness meditation. So we have a list of things that you can utilize when you're thinking about practicing mindfulness meditation. But what I like to emphasize is that last bullet: notice, respect, and redirect. So what I mean by that is notice your thoughts, respect those thoughts as they come, and then redirect your thoughts either to be something that benefits us if those prior thoughts don't necessarily benefit us or better us, but also redirect us to the present moment, right? When you talk about letting your mind drift away, we're really trying to redirect those thoughts back to the center once we're done with our exercise. Because usually we do set time limits on these activities. So making sure that we always build in that time to redirect us back to our center, redirect us back to what we were doing, and redirecting our focus. So that's really that point that I like to emphasize. As we talked about all the different methods of practicing mindfulness, one of the big ones was mindfulness breathing techniques. So this is something that I love talking about with mindfulness breathing. It's something that I talk about with students, but it impacts faculty, staff just the like. So there's two different exercises you can read about on the board. The first one being nostril breathing and the second one being abdominal breathing. So anytime I get a group this large, I really like to take this time to embarrass the fool out of y'all. Or if you don't want to, you never have to. I see a lot of y'all don't have your screen shared. So I won't even see you doing this activity, but we'll kind of go through each and focus on how each activity makes us feel. So if you will, we'll start off with nostril breathing. So if you are following along, I'll ask that you put one thumb on one nostril. And I'm going to guide you through as we do it. So as you put one thumb on one nostril, take a full deep inhale to the top and hold that inhale. And as you get to that top and you're holding, take your other finger on your other nostril and use that time to breathe out fully and deeply. So we'll do that about 2 more times, taking one thumb to one nostril. Inhale at the top. Exhale at the bottom. And one more. Inhale at the top. Exhale at the bottom. Yes, this one's always tricky during allergy season. So did anybody do that activity? How did that activity make you feel? What did you notice about maybe your body? We talked about it being allergy season. Something I like to say is quite literally, if you notice nothing else about your body during these breathing exercises, at least it gave you some insight about how you're feeling physically. So some people, when they do this activity, they're like, I actually couldn't do this activity because I'm under the weather. And if anything else, right, that tells you do need to see your primary care physician and go to seek medical help or over-the-counter prescriptions if that's something for you. And so I definitely encourage you to utilize that if that's something that you need to do for yourself, right? But what about something else? What I noticed is that I truly do take deeper, more intentional breaths. I take slower breaths, right? The air feels cooler as you're inhaling. Somebody said, Leslie says that she feels more calm, relaxed, right? So sometimes when we're bogged down in our offices, for example, we've been here for hours. We know that we're scheduled for an 8 to 4, a 9 to 5, whatever your day might look like. Sometimes we haven't been taking those full deep inhalations. We've been sitting down, kind of slunched over, not taking those deep breaths. Our breaths are very shallow. So nostril breathing is a good chance for you to kind of realize how you're breathing, check in with yourself, and take those more deep intentional breaths to kind of push you through the next activity. And the next one I'll do is abdominal breathing really quick. So with abdominal breathing, if you will, put one hand on your stomach and one hand on your chest. And we'll do a very similar activity. So take that full inhale and that full exhale. And we'll do that about 4 times. What I want you to focus on is with each inhale and exhale, you should be focusing on your stomach expanding and contracting as opposed to your chest rising and falling. So what I wouldn't want to see if we were doing this in person is I don't want to see your chest rise and fall with each breath. So I'll do this about 2 more times as y'all are doing it. And let that finish. So, right, so you can do this for a little bit longer. You can do this for 6 to 10 counts. You can do this for up to 10 minutes. You can do this however long you need to sort of get yourself reset. But something that I noticed in myself when I do this activity is I kind of have to readjust my body. I kind of have to notice where I'm sitting. Am I slunched over? Do I need to reset myself to be kind of in a more upright position, right? Because in order to make sure that my chest is not rising and falling, I have to put all that emphasis on my core. Did anybody else notice similar things or experience a kind of different sensation than from the nostril breathing?
I felt like I was concentrating too much on my chest rising, like that's where my concentration was, and not really on relaxing, because even with every breath, even though I'm filling up my abdomen, you can still feel my chest rise, and I'm going, am I doing it wrong? What am I doing wrong? So I felt like I wasn't getting as much because I was too concentrated on on the other area.
Yeah, definitely. So I see that. Some people said also that they had to concentrate overly on their posture potentially. So I think that's where you can kind of ebb and flow, do what works for you. If nostril breathing actually makes you feel a little bit more secure and something that comes more naturally, do that, right? Or you can try abdominal breathing, right? The goal is not necessarily to constantly be hyper aware of our posture. It's just thinking about taking those deeper, more intentional breaths. So when we do have to reset our bodies, it can kind of help our minds pay attention to some of those other things that we might have thought were typical stressors, but weren't actually stressors. So the example that I give is a lot of the signs of and symptoms of stress, like muscle ache, fatigue, things like that, can actually be caused by just not getting enough breathing and not giving enough like full intentional breaths. So when we think we're stressed because we have this neck pain and things like that, it could be based on our posture. It could be that we haven't been getting that intentional breath for hours and hours. So our oxygen flow isn't the best that it could be, and we're not prioritizing their breathing that way. So it kind of helps us when we do breathing exercises like this to kind of limit those external factors that might be giving us those typical signs of stress as well. Katie said something, comfort and having my hand on my chest and stomach, which added to the relaxation. I love that. So it really is doing what works best for you, because again, these are personal things that you should focus on. So we'll move this into the second activity. This is a really quick meditative activity. So before we click on the link, I just wanted to emphasize that these activities are really, really short, and they can be as short as you want them to. So this one link by Headspace is actually a minute-long mindfulness activity. So it only takes you a minute, and Headspace is a resource that we use, that I encourage students to use, that is free when you utilize the YouTube as a resource. So we'll do that if you'll press play.
Hi, and welcome to Headspace. So no matter what's going on in your life right now, no matter how many thoughts are racing around your mind, no matter how the body's feeling, just take a moment to sit down and take a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, a sense of letting go of any stress in the body, in the mind, just feeling the muscles soften and relax. And close your eyes if you'd like to. One more, breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a moment to pause, Allow the thoughts to come and go. And then just gently opening the eyes again.
Yeah, so that again, by Headspace, that can be found on
Hi,
YouTube.
and welcome.
Good resource to utilize. But these can be again as short or as long as you want. There's a bunch of resources we'll talk about in just a few moments that are up to an hour long. If that's something that you're looking for, that could be utilized as a wind down routine, or something that can be just done in the middle of the day when you feel like you have no time. But how did that make y'all feel? I know for me, it made me a little bit drowsy. You can feel free to type it in the chat, just voice it out loud.
For me, it was very soothing.
Yes,
That-
definitely.
Yeah, very relaxing and soothing.
Yeah,
agree
and so
with Leslie.
you'll get access to that link. So if you are interested, that will be available to you on the PDF version. Seems like a lot of people like it, so that's really good. I like his British accent. It's very calming. The tone that he uses is really nice. I think Headspace also has different voices that you can use too, so it doesn't just have to be that one voice. But again, I love what Alexis says. It's nice to know that it only takes a minute, right? If you only have a minute, take that minute to practice mindfulness. Be intentional with the time that you have and utilize that. If you have 2 minutes into your next meeting, maybe one of those minutes is set on, getting your computer squared away and making sure you're in the correct space, but also utilize that time for a quick reset. I think it's really good. It also is good for getting you sort of those reminders to take those breaths, make sure those breaths are full and intentional as well. So I love that y'all enjoyed it, and I'll make sure to share that with y'all when y'all get access to the presentation as well. So there are a lot of research, and I won't go into all the specifics of the research. You can do that on your own. However, everything you do see when we talk about some of these long-term benefits of meditation and how it impacts our body, all of these are hyperlinked again. So anything you saw throughout the presentation that is underlined is a hyperlink. And so there are sort of long-term suggestions for how meditation can improve memory, especially through the development of the hippocampus, which hippocampus, if you're familiar with the brain functions, the hippocampus is all related to memory. And the way I memorize that is basically you would never forget a hippo running on campus. Therefore, the hippocampus is related to memory. But again, if you are interested in seeing any of those research articles, I encourage you to take a look at that. So there are also a lot of mindfulness apps that we can utilize. So raise your hand. Is anybody familiar with any of these? Does anybody use any of these apps? I'll kind of go through one by one what each of these can be used for, but I'm pretty sure a lot of us might have already utilized some of these already.
Yeah, I've used Calm.
Yeah, so Calm, there are some free resources on the Calm app, some paid. So, right, you can use some of those initial resources as a free service. You can also do a free trial when you start out. But then if you want to go into sort of those individualized expansion features, that would be a paid thing. So that's something that we do utilize across the board to faculty, staff, and students. But just like Headspace has not only their app features, they also have YouTube guided meditations. So with the Calm app, you can find similar things on YouTube. Ooh, Greg, can you talk about the Soothing Pod?
Yes, it's a free thing, and it just has little short, like 6-minute things. I've just tried it recently a little bit, but it's kind of like mindful meditation.
Yeah, that's really nice. I encourage you to look that up as well. And the last one I'll just talk about is Insight Timer. So this is sort of a new one. It is free, so you could download that for free onto either your Google phone or your iPhone. And what that's good for is it allows you to kind of focus in on some of those meditation and stress management techniques. It features different things like music playlists, and it also features podcast style conversations on a variety of wellness topics, along with some of those longer guided meditations. So if that's something that you're interested in too, if you listen to a guided meditation or if you listen to podcasts on your way to work, that's a really great opportunity to optimize that time. Simple Habit is another one, which features different meditative activities from anywhere from 5 up to 20 minutes. And it really allows you to select your options from a particular scenario that you might experience throughout the day. So it has some for driving on a car ride versus exiting a meeting versus your wind down routine. So I really encourage you all to look up that as well. And those links will be available once we finish this presentation as well. Chill app, definitely. So we actually talk about some of those resources in a little bit. Next, we'll kind of get into, while we have some of these apps that are important for us to practice, Wellness and Recreation actually has some really good resources that we'd like to emphasize too. So the first thing that everybody can do is moving your body. So what Wellness and Recreation likes to say is that moving your body is essentially meditation in motion. And so there's a bunch of ways that we'll talk about with ways that you can get active with Wellness and Recreation. But some of the simplest techniques that we talk about that are backed by the CDC is trying to get that 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity per week. So what that essentially breaks down to is 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week of some type of moderate physical activity. So when we talk about that, what does that mean, right? So when we talk about low intensity versus vigorous intensity, what we really like to emphasize is that breath technique, right? So if I'm doing something that I can have a conversation with, if I can do something that I can also be talking with a partner with, that right there is low to moderate intensity exercise. If I can hold that conversation, that is low intensity. Versus if I'm no longer able to have that breath control, if I'm kind of struggling to link together sentences, that is more of getting into that vigorous intensity exercise. In addition to this, you can also incorporate different types of strength exercises that you want to. So according to the CDC, they recommend 2 days of some type of strength exercise. But these are just sort of good recommendations to start you off if you're interested in starting your movement routine. And so related to mindfulness and opportunities housed within Wellness and Recreation, we've got a couple of things on the list. The first one I want to emphasize as we're getting into those summer plans is our non-student membership. So Alexis, if you'll, next slide. So with that, if you have not purchased our membership yet, our non-student membership follows that you can either pay $30 a month, or you can do it payroll deducted. And so that we offer that $25 a month. So I highly encourage you. That goes throughout the summer. It also follows for our fall and spring semesters. If you have not done that, that is basically your access into our facilities. So we've got a bunch of different things within that. For example, our yoga classes are part of group fitness. And so once you are a member, you can partake in any of those things that we offer. Yoga Nidra and also Mind Body Yoga Flow are 2 of the best recommendations I have for something that is less physically active or less physically intense and more following that lower to moderate intensity exercise, right? Outdoor Adventures also has a great resources. They do a variety of trips throughout the year. If you wanted to participate in any one of them, those are things that you would have to pay into, but they are great opportunities for getting connected with nature if that's something that you're interested in. Lastly, I'll highlight becoming a wellness champion. So if this is something that you haven't heard before, we are constantly inviting new people to become a wellness champion. So essentially, as a wellness champion, you get early access into some of the wellness topics and wellness events that are happening throughout the year. So I'll pop into the chat the link to become a wellness champion, but really what you're doing is you are becoming a champion of wellness for the department that you work for. So not only do you receive that early access to those wellness resources, but then you would be responsible for sharing those resources broadly with your departments. So I really encourage you to do that. We just had an award ceremony where we were able to highlight some of those wellness champions, and it was a really positive experience. Last but not least, wellness and recreation is not the only opportunity for having a conversation about mindfulness resources. So I love that somebody already talked about Jon Kabat-Zinn. So I'll kind of go through if you're unfamiliar with some of these individuals. Judson Brewer is a really good top person that we like to highlight because he is a professor that comes from Brown University, and he has a great TED Talk that is hyperlinked called A Simple Way to Break a Bad Habit. So I encourage you look into that. Mindful.org has several helpful articles on mindfulness and guided meditation. And then the last one that you'll see under websites to bookmark is Palouse Mindfulness. So some of the resources that we talk about are not always free, but something good about Palouse Mindfulness is that this is 8 weeks of free mindfulness-based stress reduction resources. So it follows an 8-week course if you click on that link when you get access to it. That is how you can go through that, and that is all free. But if you're interested in other books to explore, I encourage you looking into Mindfulness in Plain English, or Where You Go, There You Are. With that being said, we've talked about a lot. So thank you so much for kind of sitting in on this session. I know it's been a long day for you all. Seems like your minds were kind of going in different places, but I want you to take this time also to think back at those intentions you set at the beginning. If something has not been addressed, let me know. I'm going to stay around for the next few minutes just to make sure if we can address anything that you didn't feel like was touched base on. But hopefully you've gained something, right? Whether that's just setting aside this hour for yourselves to think about something other than the project that you've got due, right? Or something other than your financial struggles, as you talked about. I think that's really important. Yes, and you'll be sent an email following this as well, so you'll get access to all these resources. But if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat about some of these resources if you do not get access to them. And everybody who registered as of 2 p.m. today should be accounted for with your emails.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We're going to hang on just a couple more minutes to see if there are any questions for Cameron. At that time, we'll end the call. I'll follow up today or early tomorrow with the presentation and just a follow-up email with a couple of resources.
Thank you very much, Cameron and
Thank
Kelly.
you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Leslie. We appreciate your attendance today and your input, sharing all of those great tips you shared.
Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
You as well.
All right, I'm going to stay on.
Yeah, if there are no further questions, we can go ahead and end the meeting.
Okie dokie. I'll follow up with you on everything